Hi, I'm a 17-year-old boy, and my parents just informed me that they would like for me to pay for college myself. I had only a few months until I was about to start college, and already accepted into the school of my choice. Well, obviously, I was hoping for my parents to provide help as they were well off enough to do. They did. The only reason why anyone started paying me. I figured it would be the same for me since they did this for my brother too, so that I'd have pay out of pocket to attend college. My father is an engineer, and my mama is a nurse. We live in good comforts. I would also say that they had enough money for me to attend college without needing to work or resorting to student loans. Also, as I said before, they did this already for my brother a few years ago, and of course that made me expect them to have a college fund laying around, waiting to be claimed when it is my turn. It was the standard they had set for me, based on how their behavior compared to what they did or didn't do for my brother, and from that I just judged them. My brother is 6 years my elder, and he went off to business school a year or two after that. My parents funded all of it, which I know because multiple times my dad bragged to a couple of his friends about it. He would brag about how he sent his eldest son to the top business school in state, and that when his son became a successful businessman, he had gotten back 10 times what was invested into him. Well, obviously I thought they would want to do the same for me as well. Even that was not going to biz school, and was in fact majoring in psychology. When I started applying to colleges, they never broached the subject of college tuition with me, so I figured I'd drop a hint. But they never spoke on it until the day I said that after waiting my turn, finally got into school of choice, and then murmured about how bad was met some them. I asked how would I be able to afford all this. Considering they had never mentioned anything about the tuition, I just felt that I was going to have to at least ask them if they would pay for it, just as my brother had. I thought they were basically saying, "Of course we'll take care of all the expenses." Instead, they said they'd want to motivate me into paying for everything myself. They told me to work my way through college or take out a student loan. Foo was obviously a very big blow to me, since I always thought they would pay for school. Now, my first instinct was to get mad at them, and I think it's pretty reasonable for me to have been annoyed. They were unable to pay for me, but had either already paid for my brother's college, or simply weren't ready to help. This felt like favoritism. So the whole discussion happened a few weeks ago, and when I confronted them as to why they had paid for my brother, but wouldn't pay one last time, they said it was reasonable. They asked that I not get angry at them before knowing the whole truth. My own father said that just days ago, one of his relatives had gotten very sick. A person who had helped him in the very beginning of his career. He was talking about one of my dad's uncles, who a couple years ago had been diagnosed with leukemia. This uncle was moderately wealthy, and he had drunk through it over the years. His kids were bad also, cause they had not been associated with him whereas and didn't even come to see him on his deathbed. Of course, following the diagnosis, it was no one but my father who felt obliged to tend for him as his wife had died a long time before. His children stopped speaking to him, or even visiting him after his wife died, as if they simply no longer had a father. Due to his addictions, everyone gave him a wide berth, and no one wanted the responsibility of looking after him, so he didn't have any other family who did give a shit about his well-being. But my dad had appreciated all the options that his uncle provided for him at the start of his career, and felt he should repay those debts by looking after him once he'd received a diagnosis. His uncle had been sick for the last couple of years, and he was treating him at his own expense, which seriously depleted what little money Melanathan save up to that point. Medical care is expensive, and there just wasn't enough cash available for him to pay my college tuition. Then he had his future to consider, and getting by on what they would be left with after paying for my college educations was going to be extremely difficult. And that's why he wanted me to be in a position where I would cover it myself. He said that he felt bad about it, but was confident I could manage. He was getting older, and he also needed to think about retirement, so he wanted to push me into looking out for myself. Even after he told me the reason, I was still angry about it, and at him over something that in many ways, and to see more joy, helped prepare both of us for what we ultimately needed. I did not want to judge my father by that. I half believed the story he told, but since some of it was true, I also knew that his uncle was a leukemia patient and had various adicetins, the type of person he could not longer live with so much to just abandon him. It didn't seem too weird to me considering we'd be kind of the only visitors he would get, and I figured my dad was helping him out with medical bills or something. But I also knew that what his uncle had done to help him land a job was real. My dad had been super upset about the passing of his uncle a few months back, even crying at that funeral. My family would visit him often, and I witnessed my dad share that special connection with his uncle. So it was hard for me to resent or pathologize him for having dumped all of that money into his uncle's treatment, leaving nothing behind for myself. That was a tough decision for me, but in the end, I did forgive my father. I let him figure out how to pay for school, but I told him that I'd find a way to do it myself. And if push came to shove and I just had to get a student loan, I assumed he would understand. He said he will for sure help me out in any way possible. My mom was the most upset by all of this, though she kept her mouth shut. But that tension never laid between them, so I thought everything was okay, with her and my dad. My mother seemed upset, but I figured it was because I'd have to work my way through college solo, and that her son didn't have to do when he went. I think she even apologized for more than my father. I could see the guilt written all over her face, and I told her it was all right, that she would be fine without being there to help me. At least my dad was not blowing through 4 years of college tuition on some dumb shit. He was spending it to actually save someone's life. And in a small way, I suppose that is indeed noble, particularly since he did one of those annoying soapbox humanitarian moves for someone whose actual, or to be precise its, own family had chosen not to support it, in effect abandoning the creature completely. I pleaded with my mother that none of this was worrying, but she remained rattled. So anyway, I had suddenly come to the sad conclusion that my father could not, foot any college tab for me, and started looking elsewhere. I opted to get a job in the few months prior that college would finally roll around. I had done a few internships and saved up some money, but that was not going to get me far. It was an attempt to make some more money and be a stopgap measure until I eventually would need student loans. It was something I wanted to avoid, as it would mean paying it off over the course of a full career. I had no idea if I would even get a decent job when I graduated, so things have been pretty emotionally taxing the past few weeks. However, last week I discovered something that dramatically altered my opinion of everyone. I worked out where all my dad's money had really gone, or at least were about to go. I guess by now, you all must have guessed a lot of this would be about my brother, so hence I was talking him quite a bit. Before I tell you what I've discovered, I want to speak a little about my connection with my brother for all of it makes sense. My brother is so much older than me that we never grew up as friends. We never were bad terms, but we also weren't so close. Everything was pretty neutral, and I suppose it was an inconvenience that my parents could not be bothered to solve. We weren't going hard against one another, but at the same time we often didn't play together, so they never felt like it was a situation that needed to be fixed or anything. That's why my brother and I were always very far apart, and that was the way we loved it. But I don't know why. The moment high school happened, something flipped in his brain, and he started treating me like a threat or some shit. Our relationship never really good to begin with. After high school, though, it was extremely strange. I would say all that strangeness is on him, too. At the time, he had just entered college, and every single time he'd come back home for a break, it was as if all he did wanted to say that he's been coming from one of the best business institutes in the state. I have no better way to express it, but he had become something of a braggart. He had also begun verbally putting me down, which he never used to do. But he was very, very crafty, and masked his attacks as pranks. When I do bring it up, he'd tell me not to take a joke so seriously, and are you really trying to fight about this? You'd think that made him sound petty, or like he was the pettiness incarnate. If you ask me, he became a jerk in college, and I believe there is still one because I'm not sure why anyone would do what he did otherwise. Came back here for a couple of weeks, then moved out on his own when he graduated college. The hardest weeks for me were those few when he was always picking on. One day I was in the galley, and he came running in, screaming something at me about my mom. We got into a full-on fight, but ever since then, we just really haven't talked to one another. But he would still figure out ways to take digs at me and be awful for literally no reason. He is literally 26 now, but yet still thinks low-key negativity will make him feel better. He graduated and then worked at a small firm for 2 or 3 years after that. However, I was aware he wasn't happy there, as he felt like a big fish in a little pond and wanted bigger things. He would moan about how moronically stupid all of his workmates were, and this guy was ever so much smarter than them. He claims it was the recession and all that nonsense that kept him from a better job. The actual reason he was unable to get better employment, in my opinion. Just because you go to a good business school doesn't mean that you're a good businessman. I always thought he behaved terribly, and was the snottiest, most obnoxious prick to work with that you could ever imagine. Note, this is just my opinion. At dinner when he visited us, he'd bellyache about those things, and my dad would stoke his already blaring ego that all those other opportunities lay just ahead for him if only he hung in there long enough to pay his dues. Instead of saying things like, "You know, Timmy, maybe you'd get promoted or wouldn't annoy people so much if you just something through once in a while," my dad was more than happy to reinforce this behavior. Anyway, I had told my friends that my parents did not want to pay for me tuition because I was very upset about it. I am so fucking glad I did, because if then, who knows, eventually, it was revealed, behind my back, that they had been funding my brother. My brother and I have never followed each other on socials. I actually blocked him. I've zero interest in his life, let alone want to see anything he does. Well, 2 of my friends do follow him because we went to the same high school, and their older siblings were also in his year, so they just think he is funny. Just over a week ago, several of my friends sent me a post that my brother had posted, and it set everything into motion. It was a photo of our family, but I had been obviously edited out. The caption read, "Thank you to my parents for helping me out like this all of my life." In that capacity, they had also been the people who were his first investors in the business he was about to launch. My friends asked me if my parents, who had apparently not a penny to contribute towards tuition money for mine, were able to invest in my brother's business. They knew that it did not add up, and thought I needed to know about the bad vibes they were perceiving. Some parts of it which my parents had not told me. That post really blew me away, and at the time I had zero clue what any of that meant. I initially wanted to tell my parents, but then thought against it because there would be no point in talking to them. I berated myself for thinking I could be any different, and why bother talking to them when they would lie about everything anyway? They may even force my brother to delete that post, and lie with him too. It was a damn hard day for me, because I had to make an impossible choice. Later in the evening, I decided that living with my parents was no longer going to remain an option for me, as they had done all along, given me a reason of being alone to show me. But they would walk through fire to help my brother, and now I knew for sure that they did in fact have a golden child, only it was not me. I went through the day, acted as if all was okay. Yet at nighttime I determined to make a break for it. I was already packing all day long, and in the night I went out again, took an Uber ride to go towards a friend's place. I had spoken to him and his parents, and they agreed for me live with them until college, so a couple of weeks or thereabouts. They knew my situation and sympathized with it, which was the reason they had even been so kind to offer me a free education to be earned, because by this point in time, their family were quite wealthy individuals who could afford such luxuries. Still thinking it over, since I think it's a little weird to be taking money from a friend and his family, but they seem more than willing to help me out. They have already done a lot for me. I mean, they are the ones that kept Junior and teenage girl living here together ever since I ran away from home. It just seems wrong to me asking them for even more than what they are doing, and in reality I am not. But these people keep getting their way by offering their help. Anyway, going back to my parents, they were quite heartbroken over everything the morning after realizing I wasn't at home and just up and gone in the middle of night. They bombarded me with calls and texts, wanting to know if I was okay, or at least where I was, so they would know that they could find me one day. They had the nerve, I swear, to ask me, why was it that I did this to them? I said little, simply passing on the post put up by my brother and leaving it there. They knew that the pretense was over, so they began to make excuses as though this could help explain everything to me. They were stupid, lame excuses that I would actually fall for. This nonsense was insulting. They even said that they were protecting me by not letting me know the real truth. Look, you know who you are, and I don't need to say this out loud again for my sake or anyone else's. But since I'd rather do things passively aggressive instead of direct anymore, like a normal fucking adult ever would, so let's just get it over with, shall we? You lied. No matter what the intention was. Honestly, too caught up on emotions and lies, whether big or small, means absolutely nothing when it's all said done, and trust is destroyed along with hearts broken forevermore. They attempted to play that, if my brother's business were successful, then they would assure I'd be able to pay off my student debts in the future. I was told all I needed to do was see it as an investment and not a sacrifice. The money was actually the least of my worries, but rather what's sad is, they were willing to gamble on brother and not on me. Far, far cheaper than sending me to college, which I would never have gone anyway if they did. Plus, they lied to me that they didn't have enough money, and the truth was that my parents had the full amount, but obviously thought it made more sense for them to spend all on just my brother instead of spending it on me. I was really devastated over all of it, and I explained to them that first off, I wanted nothing to do with coming back home at this point, but more importantly than anything else. I could tell they did not love or give a shit about me, and I didn't want to live in house with people that would treat me like, then I'd just be weighing them down. The last thing I wanted to do was. I guess that kind of freaked my mother out more than father, because she totally threw him under the bus. She informed me that she had not even been set on board with this plan from the start. She was aware that this wasn't right, but she complied simply because my dad wanted it. For the next couple of days, she attempted to reach out and told me how sorry she was about everything. She said that she never meant to hurt me. Everything just played out the way it did, because that's what my dad told her. And soon enough, she'd gotten far too deep into things to tell me the truth, but no matter how much she wanted. She told me that she was willing to pay the money, no matter how much it cost, and would get back to me if I did leave her, but that she herself didn't want Luz as a son. I did not respond when she attempted to call me, so the only means by which I could communicate was via text. It was obvious to me that she truly felt bad and sorry about everything she'd put me through, and wanted nothing more than to make things right with myself. But I didn't know how to react at all, given that I was still hurt by the fact that they had lied to me, and thought they'd never get caught. Hence I was slower in responding to her, and that proved a fault, resulting into something unfortunate for my father. But I will also note that he didn't deserve it, because as far as I'm concerned, he's totally deserving. Because I took so long to respond to her, my mother thought this was all a fault of my dad's, and well, I kind of agreed with it. If he didn't get me to forgive them and come home fast, she was going to leave him. They have been arguing over this for the longest time, and it's stupid, really. My dad believes I'm to blame for all of it, even if I don't know how. I'm actually the victim in this situation. He has no right at blaming me. He created this whole situation, and if I would have just been upfront with me from day one, then I'd feel less cheated. Sure, I would still be pissed they were not going to pay for my college tuition, but he was the one who turned all of this into lies. Those moronic lies should never have been used. What he was doing in the first place is pretty heinous all by itself. Soul-sucking, but all I thought of was my dad who, and to be clear as glass with zero judgment or ill will towards any family member out there, is really fucking furious that I'm still making the decision on when I get home. The longer I'm away from my mother, the more she puts all of this on him. Their fight continues to escalate. He thinks I have made them pay for their sins, and now it's time for me to return home. But as much I try, I'm not ready to go back, and I need time because the whole thing was really ket up, so just give me a bit of it. 1 week is not everything to make me recover from all this stuff, and I'm also not going far return just 'cause my dad needs someone on who's gonna saving his marriage. He had no loyalty when I needed it, so neither do I have a reason to give him any. But then again, I do feel a little guilty and responsible for ruining his marriage. Aita for divulging my parents' marriage and not going back home. Update 1. Hello. A little over a week since I have moved, and today finally felt like the day to go home for some real talk with Mama. My dad told me he was sick of both my mom and I, said we could do whatever we wanted. He clearly sees us leaving each other, called us selfish and inconsiderate, to be honest, coming from him. This is the pot calling the kettle black. Still, not my mother. She still hasn't given up on me and keeps texting me every day. Before, she would just say sorry, but now she's been saying that not only is she sorry, but oh, how much I miss you and regret everything we both agreed to. These days, all she wants is for me to return home. She has even spoken with my brother, where she said he wouldn't see a dime from her into his business, as it will all be for me. She'll put me through college, and I won't have to worry about how or why. At this point, she has been solid, and I know that if I at all go back to my old ways, which is run from someone who seems genuinely sorry for everything, then wouldn't be exactly like the behaviors we had before. She was put onto this path by my dad in the first place, and that doesn't mean she's not responsible, but at least that's a consolation to me. She has also said several times that this was never her plan. She adamantly did not want to do any of this, but my father convinced her if they funded the business, it would give them money back faster and be able to help me clear debts with student loans for getting through school. Anyways, bought it all, and even lied to me as well for my feelings when she knew that this was just a very fucked up story. But I will return to her, as she genuinely regrets it, and perhaps give things one more try in trying to mend our lives separately, but not apart. My feelings towards my dad are very mixed, and I'm really not sure what I'll say when I see him. Update 2. Although I am writing this at night, and for the first time in my bedroom after a long disappearance, today's visit with my parents surprised the former, and however they seemed downright off, 1. Actually, I was glad to be seeing my mom out away. My father just lurked around the corner, looking grumpy as she hugged me, and immediately burst into tears while saying sorry to me. I don't even give a shit if he was happy to see me or not. I feel good that my mom was glad to have her boy back. According to her, she lived in the same house as my father, but they had not been speaking for a couple of days. She did not confer with me about my return and what was going to follow from it. My brother was very annoyed that my mom refuses to put money into the business anymore, because this means he and my dad need to find other investors, which they literally just started working on a month before, thus delaying everything again. Of course, she knew that was the right thing to do, and therefore did it without any second thought. Her brother would not talk to her since she told him, but this time around it was no fault of hers, and there absolutely could be a repeat screw-up. My dad, too, didn't talk to me even a single time when I arrived home also, but what can be done in that as well? Both of them can remain mad that they were never even close to the same planet as me. It doesn't register with me anymore. At least my mom and I are talking again, so I'm happy about that anyway. She said it hadn't exactly had enough savings stashed away since my father earned more than her, but whatever she did have for retirement she'd get by with. She was very clear. I wouldn't have to worry about my tuition, and that she even said she'd ask her family for money if any of us needed. But again, it wasn't a big deal. More than I could hope for. My friend and his family were sad to see me go, but they got happy that finally things are at least getting better for me. I can never thank them enough for the greatest act of kindness in these past couple days. Update 3. Hey, I'm finally in college now, and my mom seems to be doing very well. I can't say the same for my dad or brother, though. A few weeks after I moved back in, my dad went to live with my brother. Now that he's a partner in his business, they have been working together on it. My parents had been working on trying to save their marriage, and were going to counseling, but how that was all faring. I never really asked my mom. I don't care about anything my dad or brother have done in their lives, and I just want to be happy with the one person who has been stable for me, which is my mom. She actually came through and set up my college tuition with her parents, so I don't have to think about that at all. I do plan on paying her back once I start making money. At the moment, I am just going to focus on grades and having fun in college, as this is a once-in-a